You know, every city has a rhythm, a pulse that beats throughout the day. But this pulse isn't just about traffic and noise. Nope, it's also a rhythm of risk, of vulnerability, that changes literally from one hour to the next. And for the very first time, we actually have a way to see and map this hidden pulse, which could completely transform how we keep our cities safe. So let me ask you a simple question. When is a city safer? At 3 a.m. when the streets are basically empty, or 3 p.m. when they're just buzzing with activity? Well, the thing is, there's no single answer. The risk, whether we're talking about accidents, emergencies, or crime, it isn't the same everywhere. It all depends on where you are and what time it is. So the real question becomes, how can we possibly know where the hotspots of vulnerability are going to pop up at any given moment?
Well, it turns out now we can. Just look at these two maps of Porto, Portugal. On the left, you've got a quiet weekend morning, mostly calm, a few little pockets of moderate vulnerability in orange. But on the right, whoa, that's a busy weekday evening. The map practically glows red, showing a massive spike in vulnerability across a ton of different areas. This right here is the city's pulse, made visible.
To really get how we're able to see this dynamic picture, we first have to talk about why the old ways of doing things just don't cut it. They completely miss these hidden rhythms.
Think about a standard risk map you might have seen. It might show you, say, where flood zones are or where high crime areas are, but it treats them as fixed, unchanging things. It doesn't know the difference between a schoolyard packed with kids at noon and that exact same schoolyard at midnight. By completely ignoring this daily ebb and flow of people, these static maps end up creating some pretty dangerous blind spots for city planners and our emergency responders.
So, to actually see that pulse, we need a new kind of tool. And that's exactly where the VERIS framework comes in. VERIS stands for Vulnerability Evaluation for Resilient Urban Systems, and it's designed to give our cities a dynamic, real-time pulse check.
The whole idea behind VERIS is built on this really cool concept called a point of temporal influence, or a POTI for short. This completely reframes how we think about a city's infrastructure. See, a POTI isn't just a static building. It's a place whose influence on the area around it changes, sometimes dramatically over time. A train station, for example, has a massive impact during rush hour, but a tiny one late at night. Figuring out what and where these POTIs are is the key to mapping the entire city's pulse.
And once you start looking for them, you realize these POTIs are literally all around us. We're talking about schools, especially during drop-off and pickup times, hospitals with their 24/7 flow of people, transport hubs during that morning and evening commute, shopping centers on a Saturday afternoon, tourist attractions in the summer, even industrial sites when shifts change. Every single one creates its own temporary zone of influence and, well, vulnerability.
Okay, so how does Veritas actually take all these signals and turn them into one of those cool maps? It uses this incredibly smart, adaptive, and data-driven process. It's pretty neat.
It all boils down to a four-step process. First, VERIS just maps out all the POTIs in a city using open data. Second, and this is the really clever part, it uses an adaptive algorithm to find natural clusters of influence, automatically grouping nearby POTIs together. Third, for every little chunk of the city, it calculates a vulnerability score based on how close it is to these clusters. And finally, it puts it all together to generate these incredible dynamic vulnerability maps for any time of day you want. Now that adaptive algorithm is the secret sauce here. By combining two really smart machine learning methods, the system can look at any city. It doesn't matter if it's dense like Paris or more spread out, and it will automatically find its unique patterns of influence. It doesn't need a human to go in and tweak a bunch of settings. It intelligently adapts to each city's specific layout, all on its own.
And the results are just fascinating. The framework was tested on 3 very different cities to prove it could adapt to pretty much any environment: Porto, Lisbon, and of course, the megacity of Paris.
Let's start with Porto. What you're looking at here is the raw input, hundreds and hundreds of dots, and each one represents a POTI, like a school, a hospital, or a bus station. This is the static blueprint of the city's important places that VERIS starts with. And here's where the magic happens. By layering that time-of-day data onto the blueprint, VERIS reveals the city's pulse. You can physically see the dramatic shift from the calm of a weekend morning to the intense, concentrated hotspots of a weekday evening rush hour. This is how you turn a bunch of raw data into actual, actionable intelligence.
Okay, next up, Lisbon. It's a bigger city with a more spread-out layout, and as you can see, the framework has absolutely no trouble mapping its unique POTI distribution. This really proves it can handle different kinds of urban structures.
And here are the results. The vulnerability patterns are different from Porto's. They're more spread out, with several distinct hotspots that appear during peak times. This just shows that adaptive clustering really working, tailoring its analysis perfectly to Lisbon's specific geography.
And finally, the ultimate test, Paris, a dense, complex metropolis with thousands of these bodies packed tightly together. Could the framework even handle this scale and complexity? I mean, this slide just shows how much data it had to process. It's a lot.
And the answer is a resounding yes. Even in a city as incredibly dense as Paris, Verus successfully identifies the shifting tides of vulnerability. It proves the methodology is robust, it's scalable, and it's ready for the world's biggest urban centers.
So, what do we do with this new superpower of being able to see a city's pulse? This is about way more than just making interesting maps. This is about building the resilient cities of tomorrow.
This really represents a fundamental shift in our thinking. The old way was static and reactive, waiting for a problem to happen in a known risk zone. The Verus way is dynamic. It's precise, and most importantly, it's proactive. It lets us anticipate where problems might come up and act before they do.
The real-world applications here are huge. For emergency response, you can position ambulances and first responders not where trouble was, but where it's going to be. For urban planning, you can model how a new metro line or a shopping mall will change the city's vulnerability pulse. And for public safety, you can spot and manage potential bottlenecks, like crowded streets during a big event, before they become dangerous.
This research gives us a completely new lens to see our cities through. It's a tool that moves us beyond just managing risk and towards creating urban environments that are safer, more resilient, and ultimately just more livable. We can now see the city's pulse. The only question left is, how are we going to use this knowledge to help it thrive?